So welcome. I'm going to be talking today about the three types of regular bank apps or bank accounts that I recommend everyone to have as a starter. If you clicked on this, you probably moved into the country, you're already here, maybe you started working, or you're just curious about what bank app types that I'm going to be recommending. The first one is one of either Revolut or Monzo. So I consider this to be, what do I call it? Online banking apps because they don't have real buildings that you can walk into and have a conversation with anyone. You just go to your app store and you download them, and then you can start working with them. The one I like the most is Revolut, but I do have Monzo as well because they both have features that I kind of like and utilize, and I'm going to go through some of the features that I think helps me with my budgeting, helps me with my day-to-day expenses, and why I think you should definitely have either one of them or both of them. And a word of caution here, I would advise that whenever you open a bank account, you wait a significant amount of months before you open another one. I think the advice is to wait for 6 months before you open another one, just for your credit score, so that you don't jeopardize your credit score very quickly. So first thing is Revolut. So one thing I love about Revolut is they enable you to have virtual cards. So you can have a normal bank card where you pretty much can spend using your bank physical card, a debit card, and then you can have several virtual cards, and you can even have disposable cards. Why do I think this is important? Because first of all, sometimes when you use your card to shop online, you have bad people stealing your card details and trying to use that card to buy other things online. So you'll be there and you see transactions that you did not make. Having Revolut as an app that I can have different cards, bank cards, which is a virtual one, the disposable one, or even the physical one, helps me to be able to control this. So I don't recommend that your salary, if you're working, drops into these online bank apps. I recommend that your salary drops into a traditional bank app, and I'm going to talk about a traditional bank after the Revolut or the online bank apps. But then I move money from my traditional bank to these online banks for spending, so that I can track what I'm spending and how I'm spending it. So then if I'm using these cards for spending, that's the bank card or the disposable or the virtual card that I will be using all the time. And it's so easy for you to cancel the card or freeze it if you see any kind of transactions that you do not recognize. And it's easy for you to go into the chat and talk to people, and they are more responsive than trying to call a traditional bank to rectify a problem for you. It takes quite a while for them to pick up the phone and actually talk to you. So these online bank apps make things quite easy. It's how I see it for my day-to-day stuff. Now, the first feature I've talked about are the different bank cards that these guys can provide you. The second one, or the second feature that I love so much is either a vault. I know Revolut sometimes call theirs vault, or Monzo calls theirs a pot. Indirectly, it's the opportunity to create little pots in your bank account that can help you to either save towards something, to either budget, or just to keep money aside where you want to use that money later. So what do I use mine for? And I think this has really helped my budgeting. So what I did was I created several pots with several titles. So I have a food pot in my Revolut. I've got holiday pots in my Revolut as well. I've got transportation pots. I've got pots for when I am buying stuff for myself. So like clothing, earrings, body lotion, whatever. Different from my food. So when I budgeted how much I spend on each of these items every single month, what I do is when my salary hits my traditional bank account, I take the amount that is in the budget for all these things, and then I put them in each of these individual pots. So let's put numbers to it. So let's say my budget for food for the whole month is £500, and my budget for clothing for the whole month is £100, and my budget for transportation is £200. And these are just figures I'm just saying. I'm not saying that's exactly what my budget is. And let's say my budget for utility bills is £50. So I create several pots with all these titles, and then I put all the money that I'll be using for these in there, so that whenever I am shopping, I know that the money I'm spending on this particular item is going to come from this pot. And therefore, if I've overspent that month, I will realize that I'll go for money from that pot and there's no money there. So then I'm like, okay, wait. For the past 2 months, I've gone above my budget in maybe the food pot and maybe the clothing pot. So I need to be careful. Do I need to increase the allowance or the budget I have for these two pots? Or do I just need to be careful on how I'm spending? Maybe I'm splurging too much. So it helps me to not have to track my money one by one from one bank account, but I can just use a card that is attributed to those pots. So one thing I've come to realize, aside from Revolut, Monzo is one that I've noticed that they can help you assign a virtual card to each and every pot. You'd have to upgrade your Monzo account, which I think is about £3 to £5 a month. So it's not too much of a deal breaker if you're looking to budget properly. So in this case, if you have a food pot in Monzo, and then you allocate a virtual card to that food pot, and you put a virtual card on your Apple Pay. So anytime you are shopping for food or like you are buying food, you use the virtual card allocated to food to pay. So let's say you have a transport pot, right? And you've allocated, let's say, £150 to it. If that month, for some reason, you've spent all the £150 by 22nd of the month, now when you're going to use that card to pay for your next bill, which is your transport bill, you notice that you've run out of cash. And then maybe you supplement it by maybe taking money from your savings. But at least every month, you know exactly how much you had left in each of these pots, which of these budgets you are going over and which of these budgets you are going under. So usually if I have a budget for, let's say, transportation, and maybe that month I had 2 weeks off of work, so my transportation bill was way lesser, and for some reason I have about £70 left in my transportation pot, I will usually leave it there. And in my mind, I consider it as surplus money. So I'll leave it there for a few months. And if for some reason my transportation bill goes higher in other months, it would even out. And if after a year, I notice that, I've got extra £70 in my transportation pot, to me, I consider it as free money, because in my mind, I'm like, I should have spent it, but I haven't. So I've saved it for myself. So I use that to just give myself a little treat. But just having these pots with different cards associated to it, which you use to spend, rather than spending from one card and trying to budget with an Excel sheet every day, just becomes tiring. And it's hard for people to budget when they have to think of it that way. The next type of bank account or bank app that I would recommend, or bank type I would recommend, is the traditional banks. Now, I was speaking to a few other people who had moved to the UK after I'd moved here, and they were telling me that, they have their salary hit their Revolut or their Monzo bank account. I would highly not recommend that to happen. Why is this? Your salary has all the money that's coming to you every single month. And if you're using your Revolut card to be shopping left, right, center, now if someone steals your card details, they have access to all your pot of salary whenever it drops. And I do not want to have that risk. So I do have a traditional bank account, so like the likes of NatWest, Lloyds, Halifax, whoever you choose to use, but I get a bank card, like a debit card, and I don't usually use it for transactions. You hardly ever find the details of this debit card anywhere online saved on my Apple Pay. When it happens that way, I also manage to be able to send the money from my traditional bank app or my traditional bank account to these little other online bank apps that I have signed on to, and then I use the budget I've created there for my various spending or shopping. and you can now keep track of how much you have left when you spend, or when you take your budgeted amount out of it, and where you're going to put that. And also, when you start like getting to a point where, or even if you've passed that stage already, when you start getting to a point where you are trying to get like a mortgage, buy a house, blah blah blah, you usually need to show bank account statements. And I find it really easy to use the traditional bank apps or the traditional bank accounts. Why is that? Because my salary hits that account. I take some out for like my daily spending, and then I push some into my savings account. So I'm able to prove where my salary hits and how much goes out. Because you get asked questions about, what is your monthly expenditure when you're trying to get a mortgage or you're trying to get a loan? What's your monthly expenditure? Do you have dependents? How much is your salary? Bring 3 months bank statement to prove where you're getting your money from. It's so easy for me to just whip up my traditional bank statement and not have to add all the other bank statements that I get from like Revolut and Monzo. And it's easy for me to explain the transactions on there because the transactions on there are very minimal. I don't have the tiny amount I spent at Boots and the tiny amount I spent at Tesco and the tiny amount I spent at Sainsbury's all showing in the bank accounts, which make it so hard for me to interpret what's going on there and where my monies went and who took this and who took that. I try to avoid all that in my traditional bank account statements. The third type of bank account I highly recommend is a high interest earning savings account. So the one that I use, and let me put this out there, this video is not sponsored in any way whatsoever by any of these companies I've mentioned. The one that I use and I totally love is Marcus by Goldman. I know a lot of people have not heard of this before, but I find that they usually give me the highest interest rates for the money I put in my savings account. And also they are a full savings account provider, so they don't do traditional current accounts, they just do savings. So as at now, I think the rate I get from them is about 4.25, and the best part of it is I'm allowed to take the money out anytime I want, but the interest rate is calculated daily. So they give you the interest at the end of the month, but it's compounded daily, if that makes sense. So anytime I get my salary and I push the money I want to put into my little pots or my little online banking apps for my day-to-day transactions, then whatever I've budgeted to save, I push it into my markers. I think another one I've come across is Chase Bank app. So they've got Chase Saver. That also gives really good interest compared to Marcus. There was a point where Chase was actually giving more interest than Marcus was giving. So I switched the money between them. But as I said before, do not just open all these accounts at once because it will hit your credit score. Just make sure you open them within like a reasonable period of time, and then you can utilize it the way you want to. So with Marcus or Chase, you can take money out anytime, anywhere, but as long as there's money sitting in there, you'll be earning decent interest on it. And to be fair, I was earning very good interest, and I was able to also track how much money I was saving. So in my mind, whenever I put the money there, I pretend it doesn't exist because I have budgets for everything that I spend. I had budgets to the core, to the latter of every single thing that I spend, and I put it in the pots so that I don't have to be monitoring it every single day. As long as I'm using that virtual card to pay for transport or to pay for food or to pay for anything, and the card is not declining, I know I'm staying within the budget. If it starts declining, I'm a bit cautious about what I'm using the money for and what has happened that month for me to lose too much money than I thought I would have used. So with Marcus and Chase Saver, I find it to be just so helpful to have a good savings that I can take money out at any time, and then I can get like a good interest on my savings. So after that, I invest in other things, and I'll do different videos about what I invest in and how I make some more money from all my other investments. But these are like the basic bank apps that I recommend almost everyone to have, just so they can keep an eye on what's going on in their life and also keep in charge of pretty much all the transactions they are doing, and to make their lives very easy and simple. All in all, we recommend that you don't have too many bank apps or too many bank accounts, especially if you're not using them for anything. There was a point where I had too many bank accounts, so I had to close some down. But the ones that I'm actively using for my life and to help with my budgeting and to keep myself increasing my wealth through like better rates on my savings. I made sure those were alive and I kept track of it. And it was easy when I was applying for a loan or getting a mortgage or any other thing to prove where my income was and where I was getting my income from and what my expenditure was, because I can easily tell off the top of my head because of how much I direct into these little pots and these other bank accounts that I have.